A woman stands quietly at the edge of a military base memorial service, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the sea of dress uniforms surrounding her. The autumn wind catches the edges of a folded American flag in her hands as she approaches the podium where families are invited to share memories of the fallen. General William Harrison barely glances up from his prepared speech when she requests to speak about her brother. When she mentions that Staff Sergeant Michael Torres died protecting his unit, the general's expression hardens with impatience. "Ma'am, this ceremony is for families who understand military sacrifice, not civilians who romanticize warfare," he says dismissively, noting her nursing scrubs visible beneath her coat. The assembled crowd murmurs uncomfortably as she tries to explain her brother's final mission. Just as tears threaten to overwhelm her composure, the sound of marching boots echoes across the memorial grounds. All heads turn as a formation approaches through the morning mist. From which part of the world are you witnessing this moment of profound military brotherhood today? If stories of honor transcending rank and recognition inspire you, consider subscribing for more moments where true warriors stand for those who cannot speak for themselves. The National Memorial Cemetery of Arizona stretched across the Sonoran Desert like a testament to American military sacrifice, its white headstones arranged in perfect rows beneath the endless blue sky. This November morning, the main amphitheater had been transformed for a special memorial service honoring soldiers killed in recent overseas operations. The ceremony drew hundreds of military families, active duty personnel, and veterans from across the Southwest, all gathered to remember those who had made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country. At the center of the amphitheater's elevated platform sat the distinguished attendees, generals, admirals, senators, and high-ranking Pentagon officials whose presence underscored the significance of this National Day of Remembrance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the assembled crowd, highlighting the mixture of dress uniforms, formal civilian attire, and the quiet dignity that marked military ceremonies. General William Harrison commanded the proceedings with the authority of someone who had spent 35 years climbing through Army ranks to reach his current position as Director of Military Personnel. At 58, his silver hair and chest full of ribbons projected exactly the kind of military leadership that impressed Pentagon officials and intimidated subordinates. His reputation for maintaining strict protocol and military bearing had earned him respect throughout the defense establishment, though some whispered that his concern for appearances sometimes overshadowed his concern for individual soldiers. Beside him sat Admiral Rebecca Chun, the highest-ranking woman in the Navy's Pacific Fleet Command, whose presence at the ceremony represented the military's commitment to honoring all service members regardless of gender or service branch. Her distinguished career had broken barriers throughout the naval establishment, and her opinions carried significant weight in Pentagon decision-making circles. Also present was Senator Patricia Williams, chairwoman of the Armed Services Committee, whose political career had been built on strong support for military families and veterans' benefits. Her attendance at the memorial service was both genuine tribute to the fallen and calculated political gesture to demonstrate her commitment to military issues in an election year. Throughout the amphitheater, families of the fallen sat in reserved sections, their grief palpable despite the formal setting. Gold Star mothers clutched photographs and folded flags. Fathers wore their sons' and daughters' military decorations with pride and sorrow, and children too young to fully understand loss fidgeted in their formal clothes while sensing the profound sadness that surrounded them. Among these grieving families, in the back rows typically reserved for extended family and friends, sat Isabella Torres, whose simple black dress and worn handbag marked her as someone of modest means who had traveled far to attend this ceremony. At 31, she possessed the kind of quiet strength that came from years of working double shifts as a pediatric nurse to support herself and help her younger brother through his military career. Isabella's dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands, calloused from years of medical work and patient care, held a folded American flag with the careful attention that marked it as precious beyond measure. Around her neck hung a simple chain with her brother's dog tags, their metal worn smooth from constant touching during the months since his death. She looked exactly like what she was, a hard-working civilian who had lost her only family member to military service, someone whose grief was genuine, but whose understanding of military culture and protocol was limited by her civilian background. Her nursing scrubs were visible beneath her black coat, evidence that she had driven through the night from her hospital shift in Phoenix to attend this ceremony honoring her brother's sacrifice. As the formal proceedings began with military precision, General Harrison delivered opening remarks about sacrifice, duty, and the debt that America owed to its fallen heroes. His speech was polished and appropriate, touching on themes that resonated with military families while maintaining the dignified tone expected at such solemn occasions. Today we gather not just to mourn our losses, but to celebrate lives dedicated to service, to honor sacrifice that preserved our freedoms, and to support the families whose loved ones answered the nation's call to duty, General Harrison declared, his voice carrying clearly across the desert memorial grounds. The ceremony proceeded through its carefully orchestrated elements, honor guard presentations, musical tributes, and readings from military chaplains representing various faiths. Each component was designed to provide comfort to grieving families, while reinforcing the military values and traditions that gave meaning to the sacrifices being honored. As the formal program neared its conclusion, General Harrison announced the portion of the ceremony that always carried the most emotional weight. We now invite family members to share brief remembrances of their loved ones. These personal tributes remind us that behind every military casualty statistic is an individual life, a unique story of service and sacrifice. Several family members approached the podium over the following 30 minutes, each sharing memories that brought their fallen relatives to life for the assembled crowd. A Gold Star mother spoke about her son's letters home, describing his efforts to help Afghan children. A father shared stories of his daughter's determination to become a combat medic despite the dangers involved. A widow read from her husband's journal about the bonds formed with his fellow soldiers during multiple deployments. Each tribute was met with respectful attention and genuine emotion from the crowd. Military personnel and families alike understood the courage required to stand before hundreds of strangers and transform private grief into public remembrance. As the personal tributes portion neared its end, Isabella Torres made her way slowly toward the platform. Her movement through the crowd was hesitant, marked by the nervousness of someone unaccustomed to public speaking and overwhelmed by the formal military setting. General Harrison consulted his program notes, clearly expecting the next speaker to be someone from the official list of registered family members. His expression showed mild irritation when Isabella approached the podium, an unknown civilian whose presence hadn't been coordinated through proper military channels. "Excuse me, ma'am," General Harrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to maintaining strict ceremony protocols. "This portion of the program is reserved for immediate family members of the honored fallen, and all speakers must be pre-registered through military family services." Isabella stopped several feet from the podium, her voice barely audible as she addressed the general. "Sir, I'm Isabella Torres. My brother, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, was killed 3 months ago in Afghanistan. I submitted the proper paperwork weeks ago requesting to speak today." General Harrison frowned as he consulted his documents, clearly annoyed by what he perceived as an administrative oversight that was disrupting the ceremony's carefully planned flow. His aide whispered something in his ear that caused his expression to shift from irritation to skeptical attention. "Ms. Torres, I see here that your brother served with distinction, but I'm not seeing your registration in our speaker files. These ceremonies require careful coordination to ensure appropriate content and time management." Isabella's hands tightened on her brother's flag as she tried to explain her situation. "General, I submitted everything through the family notification officer who contacted me after Michael's death. I was told I could speak about his service and his final mission." This mention of discussing operational details caused General Harrison's expression to harden with the kind of disapproval that marked career officers who prioritize security protocols above emotional considerations. "Ma'am, if your brother's death involved classified operations, then the details of his service are not appropriate for public discussion. This ceremony honors sacrifice, but it's not the venue for sharing operational information that could compromise ongoing military activities." Isabella's voice grew slightly stronger despite her obvious nervousness. "Sir, I'm not trying to reveal classified information. I just want people to understand what Michael did to save his unit, how he died protecting other soldiers who are alive today because of his courage." General Harrison's patience was clearly wearing thin. He looked out at the assembled crowd of military families, active duty personnel, and distinguished guests, obviously concerned about maintaining the ceremony's dignity and staying on schedule. "Ms. Torres, I appreciate your desire to honor your brother's memory, but this ceremony has specific protocols designed to provide appropriate tribute while respecting security requirements and time constraints. Perhaps you could submit written remarks for inclusion in our memorial publication." The dismissive tone was clear to everyone present. Isabella stood isolated at the edge of the platform, her civilian status and lack of familiarity with military protocol marking her as an outsider whose grief, while genuine, didn't warrant disruption of established procedures. Admiral Chun shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly recognizing the emotional cruelty of dismissing a Gold Star family member in such a public setting, but unwilling to challenge General Harrison's authority in front of the assembled crowd. Isabella's voice carried desperation as she made one final attempt to honor her brother's memory. "General, Michael saved 12 soldiers when his forward operating base was attacked. He held his position for over an hour, allowing wounded men to be evacuated while enemy forces tried to overrun their defenses. Those soldiers are alive today because of what he did." "Ms. Torres," General Harrison interrupted, his voice taking on the commanding tone he used to end discussions he considered inappropriate. "Your brother's service is honored by his presence on our memorial rolls. However, this ceremony is designed for families who understand military service and sacrifice, not for civilians who romanticize combat operations based on incomplete information." The words hit Isabella like physical blows. Around the amphitheater, she could see military families nodding in apparent agreement with General Harrison's assessment, their expressions showing the kind of uncomfortable sympathy reserved for people who were pushing beyond acceptable boundaries of grief. "Sir," Isabella tried once more, her voice now carrying both desperation and dignity, "I'm not romanticizing anything. I'm a nurse. I understand injury and death. I understand sacrifice. Michael was my only family, and he died saving other people's brothers and sons and fathers." General Harrison's expression showed the kind of impatient authority that marked career officers dealing with civilians who didn't understand military hierarchy and protocol. "Ma'am, being a nurse doesn't qualify you to understand combat operations or military sacrifice at the level we're honoring here today. Your brother served honorably, but this ceremony requires speakers who can represent military family perspectives appropriately." He gestured toward his watch, clearly indicating that Isabella's unauthorized appearance was disrupting carefully planned proceedings. "I'm going to ask you to return to your seat so we can continue with our scheduled program." Isabella stood frozen at the edge of the platform, her brother's flag clutched in trembling hands, her opportunity to honor his sacrifice being dismissed by the very military establishment he had died serving. Just as she began to step away from the microphone, the desert morning was split by a sound that caused everyone in the amphitheater to turn toward the memorial entrance, the distinctive cadence of military boots marching in perfect synchronization. Through the morning heat shimmer, a formation of 12 Navy SEALs appeared, moving with the precision that marked Special Operations Forces. They wore dress blue uniforms, their ribbons and decorations speaking of multiple combat deployments and distinguished service. But it was their faces that captured immediate attention. These were men whose emotions were clearly visible despite their military bearing. The SEAL formation advanced across the memorial grounds with measured steps, their synchronized movement creating a visual rhythm that commanded absolute attention from every person present. As they drew closer, it became clear that several of these elite warriors had tears streaming down their faces, an extraordinary display of emotion from men trained to maintain composure under the most extreme circumstances. The lead SEAL, Master Chief Petty Officer James Rodriguez, approached the platform where Isabella still stood frozen. His face showed the kind of controlled grief that marked someone honoring a fallen comrade whose loss had affected him profoundly. Without words, Master Chief Rodriguez came to attention and rendered a perfect salute, not to General Harrison or the other distinguished officials, but directly to Isabella Torres. The amphitheater fell into absolute silence as the other 11 SEALs followed suit, creating a line of America's most elite warriors saluting a civilian nurse whose brother they had served alongside in combat. "Ma'am," Master Chief Rodriguez said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent memorial grounds. "We are Team 7, and we served with your brother, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, during his final deployment. We came here today to ensure that his sacrifice is properly honored and understood." Isabella stared at the SEALs in shock, her grief momentarily overwhelmed by confusion about why these elite military personnel were showing such extraordinary respect to her civilian status. Master Chief Rodriguez continued, his voice thick with emotion despite his professional bearing. "Staff Sergeant Torres saved every man in this formation. When our position was overrun and we were trapped with wounded teammates, your brother left his secure position and fought through enemy fire to reach us." The SEAL beside him, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson, stepped forward with tears openly streaming down his face. "Ma'am, your brother carried 2 of us to safety under direct enemy fire. He went back 3 times to evacuate wounded SEALs who couldn't move on their own." General Harrison sat motionless in his chair, his earlier dismissal of Isabella now revealed as a profound misjudgment of the situation he was witnessing. Master Chief Rodriguez's voice grew stronger as he continued the account of Michael Torres's heroism. "Staff Sergeant Torres was not attached to our unit officially, but when our base was attacked, he volunteered to reinforce our position. He had no obligation to risk his life for Navy personnel, but he understood that American lives were in danger." Another SEAL, Petty Officer First Class David Kim, wiped tears from his eyes as he addressed Isabella directly. "Ma'am, your brother talked about you constantly. He carried your picture and letters in his gear. He was proud that his sister was saving lives as a nurse while he was protecting lives as a soldier." The emotional display from these elite warriors was unprecedented in the formal military setting. SEALs were legendary for their emotional control and professional bearing. Yet here they stood openly weeping as they honored a fallen soldier who had died saving their lives. Master Chief Rodriguez turned to address General Harrison and the assembled military officials. "Sir, with respect, Staff Sergeant Torres earned more than military decorations through his actions that night. He earned the eternal gratitude of every SEAL in this formation, and we will not allow his sacrifice to be dismissed or diminished." He faced Isabella again, his voice carrying the authority of someone speaking truth that could not be challenged. "Ma'am, your brother died holding a defensive position for over 2 hours while we evacuated 12 wounded SEALs to safety. Enemy forces were advancing on our location, and without his covering fire, none of us would have survived." Chief Thompson stepped forward with a folded document. "Ms. Torres, your brother has been posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in combat. The ceremony was delayed due to classification issues, but the award was approved by the highest levels of Naval Special Warfare Command." The revelation hit the amphitheater like a physical shock. The Navy Cross was the second highest military decoration for valor, awarded only for extraordinary heroism in combat against enemy forces. Master Chief Rodriguez continued the presentation with formal military precision. "Staff Sergeant Michael Torres distinguished himself by extraordinary heroism while serving alongside Naval Special Warfare personnel during enemy action in Afghanistan. His voluntary actions under fire saved the lives of 12 Special Operations personnel and prevented what could have been one of the worst losses in recent SEAL history." As the citation continued, General Harrison's face showed the profound embarrassment of someone who realized he had dismissed the sister of one of the war's most decorated heroes. Staff Sergeant Torres's courage, his willingness to risk everything for personnel outside his own unit, and his sacrifice in holding defensive positions until all wounded could be evacuated represent the highest traditions of American military service, Master Chief Rodriguez concluded. The SEAL formation remained at attention, their continued salute to Isabella creating a scene that challenged every person present to reconsider their assumptions about military sacrifice and family understanding of that sacrifice. Isabella finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. He never told me about any of this. In his letters, he just talked about helping people and missing home." Chief Thompson smiled through his tears. Ma'am, that's exactly what Staff Sergeant Torres was like. He never talked about his own heroism, just about his responsibility to bring everyone home safely. Master Chief Rodriguez addressed the assembled crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed combat heroism firsthand. Ladies and gentlemen, Isabella Torres understands military sacrifice better than most people in uniform. She supported her brother throughout multiple deployments. She worked extra shifts as a nurse to help with his military expenses, and she kept faith with his service even when she didn't fully understand the dangers he faced. He turned to General Harrison with respect but unmistakable firmness. Sir, this woman has earned the right to honor her brother's memory in any setting where military sacrifice is being recognized. Staff Sergeant Torres died protecting American warriors, and his sister deserves our respect and gratitude, not dismissal. The silence that followed was broken by spontaneous applause from the assembled military families. What had begun as support for General Harrison's protocol concerns had transformed into recognition of Isabella's right to honor her brother's supreme sacrifice. General Harrison stood slowly, his earlier authority replaced by visible humility and regret. Miss Torres, I owe you and your brother's memory the most profound apology possible. I dismissed your grief and your right to speak without understanding the magnitude of your brother's heroism or the sacrifice your family has made. He approached Isabella with obvious shame. Your brother died saving some of America's most elite warriors, and you have endured months of grief while his heroism remained classified. I failed to show the respect that both of you deserved. Isabella accepted the apology with grace that surprised everyone present. General, you were trying to maintain appropriate ceremony standards. I understand that my civilian appearance and lack of military background might have seemed inappropriate for this setting. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward one final time. Ma'am, if I may, we'd like you to know that Staff Sergeant Torres' sacrifice didn't just save 12 SEALs that night. Those 12 men have continued serving, have completed additional missions, and have saved more American lives because your brother ensured they survived to continue fighting. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Your brother's heroism multiplied through every mission we've completed since that night. His sacrifice continues to protect American interests and save American lives every time one of us deploys. As the SEAL formation prepared to depart, Chief Thompson presented Isabella with a SEAL Trident pin. Ma'am, this is from the team. We want you to know that Staff Sergeant Torres earned honorary membership in Naval Special Warfare through his actions that night. He died as one of us. Isabella accepted the pin with tears streaming down her face, finally understanding the full magnitude of her brother's sacrifice and the respect he had earned from America's most elite warriors. The memorial ceremony continued with Isabella delivering the tribute to her brother that she had traveled so far to provide. But now her words carried the validation of the warriors who had witnessed his heroism firsthand. Her simple nurse's perspective on sacrifice and service resonated with the assembled crowd in ways that formal military speeches could not achieve. As the ceremony concluded, Master Chief Rodriguez approached General Harrison privately. Sir, if I may speak frankly, civilians like Ms. Torres often understand military sacrifice more deeply than career officers realize. She worked double shifts for years to support her brother's service, and she maintained faith in his mission even when she couldn't understand the full scope of what he was doing. General Harrison nodded, clearly processing lessons that would influence his future interactions with military families. Master Chief, today has been educational in ways I didn't expect. Thank you for ensuring that Staff Sergeant Torres received the recognition he earned. 6 months later, Isabella Torres was invited to speak at military family support conferences throughout the Southwest, sharing her perspective on the challenges faced by civilian family members who support military careers while maintaining their own professional responsibilities. Her story became a case study in military family services training, illustrating the importance of recognizing that understanding sacrifice doesn't require wearing a uniform, and that civilian family members often make sacrifices that parallel and support military service in ways that aren't immediately visible to military leadership. General Harrison implemented new protocols for memorial ceremonies that ensured Gold Star family members received appropriate support and recognition regardless of their civilian status or familiarity with military protocol. The 12 SEALs whose lives were saved by Staff Sergeant Torres continued their military careers, and each of them maintained contact with Isabella, ensuring that she remained connected to the military family that her brother had died protecting. At subsequent memorial ceremonies, General Harrison would often remind attendees that military families serve alongside their uniformed relatives, that sacrifice takes many forms, and that the courage to honor fallen heroes sometimes comes from unexpected sources. Staff Sergeant Torres and his sister Isabella remind us that heroism and understanding of military sacrifice exist throughout American society, not just within military ranks, he would tell assembled crowds. Our responsibility is to recognize and honor that sacrifice wherever we find it, regardless of whether it wears a uniform. The memorial wall at the National Cemetery of Arizona now includes a special section honoring military family members whose support enabled the service and sacrifice of their uniformed relatives, with Isabella Torres recognized as the inaugural honoree for her years of supporting her brother's military career while serving her community as a healthcare professional. Have you ever witnessed someone whose quiet sacrifice supported the heroism of others? Sometimes the greatest courage belongs not just to those who serve in uniform, but to the family members who support that service through their own sacrifices, who maintain faith in missions they cannot fully understand, and who honor fallen heroes with the dignity that comes from sharing in their sacrifice every day of their civilian lives.